Welcome, listeners. Tonight's story begins in darkness. A man dragged hooded through a collapsing underground bunker while alien patrols close in above. A resistance on the run. A secret that could topple an empire. Not with weapons, but with an idea. As survival turns into sacrifice, and fear into defiance. One question rises. Can a single choice change the fate of worlds? Stay with us. Sirens knifed through the underground corridor as the old man was half carried, half dragged over slick concrete. His feet kept missing their own rhythm, skidding in cold puddles that smelled of rust and mold. A black hood sealed him in darkness, the fabric sharp with disinfectant. But sound leaked through, boots slapping water, a distant generator coughing, the wet rasp of his own breath. Rough hands clamped his arms to keep him upright, not out of mercy, but to deliver him intact. The passage tilted downward, colder with every step, like the city's throat. Somewhere behind the walls, pipes ticked as they cooled, and far above, the occupation's patrol drones murmured like insects. He counted steps to stay sane. 10, 20, 30, until a sudden stop snapped his neck forward. Fingers dug into his biceps. Someone yanked him to face a sealed door. Metal groaned. A pressure lock vented with a hiss that tasted of oil and ozone. The door scraped open, grinding on grit, and a wedge of brutal white light knifed under the hood. He didn't see it, but he felt it. Heat on his eyelids, the promise of cameras, of judgment, of a chair. The hands shoved him through, faster now, as if the bunker itself wanted him swallowed before it changed its mind. And the sirens faded, leaving his heartbeat raw. The hood was ripped away, and white light detonated across his vision. Clarke flinched, lid slamming shut. But it made no difference. The glare burned red through skin. Hands forced him down. Cold metal met his spine. His wrists were wrenched outward and locked to the chair arms, cuffs biting deep enough to pulse with his heartbeat. The air here was different, dry, filtered, carrying the faint tang of heated circuitry and old fear. Shapes moved beyond the lights, only silhouettes, human outlines haloed in sterile brightness. A voice cut through. Female, controlled, sharpened by purpose. Dr. Adrian Clarke, Chief Executive Officer of Novaris Incorporated. A pause, like a blade held at the throat of silence. You stand condemned for treason against the human race, collaboration with the Zerath Empire, profiteering while millions starved. Somewhere metal scraped, someone shifting their weapon. Clarke swallowed against the dryness climbing his throat, forcing his eyes open to slits. The room was a blur of glare and shadow, but he felt their hatred like heat from a furnace. He didn't beg. He didn't shake. He drew one slow breath that trembled only at the edges. I plead not guilty, he said, voice hoarse yet steady, as if the word guilty belonged to a smaller story than the one he had been living for decades. A chair scraped. Boots crossed the floor with a purpose that had weight behind it. Clarke felt the presence before he saw the outline. A young man stepping into the glare, arm extended, a pistol steady at the level of Clarke's eyes. The muzzle was close enough to eclipse the light. The man's voice did not shake. My parents died in the famine, he said, and the words carried no drama, only fact, like a gravestone read aloud. Clarke looked at him properly now, at the rigid jaw, the sleepless eyes. He nodded once, slow. I cannot measure that loss, he replied. I won't pretend to, around them. The room held its breath. Someone muttered a curse. The gunman's finger tightened. Clarke spoke again, louder, cutting through the moment before it hardened into the last one. If you pull that trigger, you kill the only campaign that has ever truly hurt them. A harsh laugh burst from the shadows. You? Clarke's gaze never left the pistol. Yes, he said. Not with bombs, not with fleets. With something older, something they never learned to fear. The young man blinked, confusion cracking the mask of anger just enough. Clarke took the opening like oxygen. Coffee, he said, and the room tilted into silence. Laughter broke first, short, sharp, disbelieving. Coffee? Someone spat, the word bouncing off concrete like a joke told at the wrong funeral. Clarke didn't look at them. His eyes stayed on the bright circle of light above the gun barrel still pointed his way. Turn off the recording, he said. The young commander, Lucy, stiffened. You don't give orders here. Clarke's voice remained level, almost bored. You're recording this to broadcast my execution. That file is evidence. Evidence gets people erased. A shift rippled through the room, subtle but real. Lucy hesitated. Clarke leaned forward against the cuffs, metal biting skin. If Crown Fire exists and you keep that footage, High Command won't punish you. They'll remove you. The unfamiliar word dropped into the chamber like a tool in a silent factory. Heads turned. Breathing slowed. Even the man with the gun blinked. Lucy's jaw clenched. What did you just say? Clarke let the silence stretch, savoring the weight of it. Ask Dionys, he said quietly. Not you. Stop. The word wasn't loud, but it cut clean through the room's rising noise. A figure stepped forward from the shadowed back wall, older than the others, movements controlled, economical. She wore no insignia, no weapon in her hands. Yet space opened around her as if authority had mass. Lucy went still, jaw tightening, exposed. Clarke watched the woman approach through the haze of light. Recognizing the posture before the face, "Your mother," he said. Not as a question. She didn't confirm it. Her eyes stayed on him. Steady. Measuring. Do you have vindication? She asked. Clarke's lips twitched with tired amusement. Operation Crownfire. The name landed heavier than any accusation. Several heads turned sharply. Someone swore under their breath. Mother's expression barely shifted, but the air pressure in the room seemed to drop. She turned toward a sealed side door. No one speaks. No one records. She ordered. Then she stepped into the communications chamber, the door closing with a soft, final click, leaving the rest of them staring at the old man like he had just rewritten gravity. Lucy's voice came back harder, stripped of shock. Explain! No speeches! No games! Clarke nodded, shoulders aching against the restraints, and let his gaze drift toward the blur of faces behind the glare. Empires don't fall because someone punches them, he said. They fall when enough people stop agreeing they should exist. A scoff rose, but he pressed on. Coffee isn't poison. It's a lever. The word hung there, unfamiliar in a room trained to think in explosives. 17th century Europe. Coffee houses appeared, and people who weren't nobles suddenly had somewhere to talk. Politics, trade, ideas. Revolutions didn't start with cannons. They started with conversations. Someone muttered, "This isn't history class." Clarke's voice sharpened. The Zerath metabolize caffeine like we do. It makes them alert, sociable, questioning. I built coffee houses on their homeworld. One long communal table. Nowhere to hide. Nowhere not to listen. Lucy's eyes narrowed. And? Clarke met her stare. Students first, then merchants, then workers. You don't stab an empire in the chest. You slip a blade between the ribs and wait. Wolfgang's voice cut in, tight with contained anger as he read from the tablet in his hands. You authored the food priority bill. The words felt heavier than the room's concrete ceiling. Clarke did not flinch. Yes, he said. A ripple of sound moved through the chamber. Rage, disbelief, grief surfacing all at once. Lucy stepped forward. You turned Earth into a farm, she said. Each word measured like a strike. Clarke lifted his chin against the glare. The Zerath wanted metals. Tin, copper, iron, once mined, gone forever. Crops regrow. A bitter laugh burst from someone in the dark. You're justifying starvation. Clarke's voice hardened. I'm explaining the math of occupation. There were no good options, only outcomes. The young man with the pistol tensed again. My parents were part of your math. Clarke met his eyes. Yes, he said quietly. And if we ever rebuild, it will be with metals they didn't strip from us. That was the trade. Silence followed. Thick, suffocating. Not forgiveness, not understanding. Just the weight of a choice no one in the room had been forced to make, and the bodies it left behind. The Chinese analyst leaned forward, eyes bright behind the glow of her tablet. We've seen them, she said. New arrivals, blue sashes, scientists. They talk about reform. Clarke's gaze sharpened. Volari, he replied. A word they didn't use 10 years ago. Wolfgang frowned, scanning his data. You're saying this group met in coffee houses near Zerath universities. Clarke cut in. Students, researchers, thinkers. They sat, drank, talked, compared notes, began asking why the Emperor's Council hides information. The American shook his head. That's not rebellion. That's gossip. Clarke's voice dropped, steady as steel. Gossip is how revolutions breathe before they learn to shout. Lucy's anger didn't fade, but it shifted, becoming something colder, more focused. How do we confirm? She demanded. Clarke answered without hesitation. Follow the coffee shipments, track distribution clusters, cross-reference with blue sash sightings. The analyst's fingers moved rapidly, pulling up maps and cargo logs. On the screen, patterns emerged, trade routes converging on academic districts, shipments tagged to communal venues. The room fell quiet, not from disbelief this time, but recognition. The evidence didn't look like a weapon. It looked like the beginning of a question the Zerath had never expected their own people to ask. The side door opened with a muted hiss, and Mother stepped back into the light. Her face gave nothing away, but the room shifted around her, tension snapping tight as wire. It's real, she said. No one spoke for a moment. The words needed space to settle. Lucy exhaled slowly, as if she'd been holding that breath since the hood came off Clarke's head. Clarke lowered his gaze, not in triumph, but in weary acceptance. Then we move, Mother continued. She spread a worn transit map across a crate. Zerath Logistics Node beneath the old Metro Exchange. Drone patrols. Signal tower active. Wolfgang's jaw tightened. You want proof and survival in the same mission? Mother nodded. We retrieve shipment manifests tied to coffee distribution. Volari clusters, nothing else. The American muttered. Suicide. Clarke looked at him. Verification. He corrected. Lucy traced the route with one finger, already calculating entry points, air pockets, fallback lines. Fallback. The room felt smaller now, not from fear, but from purpose. No one wanted this mission. That was why it had to be done. Water roared through the maintenance artery like a living thing, slamming against the bulkhead as Lucy forced the hatch wheel around. The seal gave with a cough of stale air, and cold runoff surged past their boots, knee-deep and rising. "Move," Mother ordered. Already stepping in. The tunnel lights were dead. Only their helmet beams cut thin, white tunnels through mist and drifting insulation. Clarke stumbled as the current yanked at his legs, Wolfgang catching his harness before he went under. Somewhere above, Zerath drones hummed, the vibration bleeding through concrete like distant thunder. The passage angled downward, and the water pressed harder, trying to own the corridor. Pipes along the ceiling ticked and groaned, metal stressed to failure. Lucy checked the wrist scanner. Oxygen stable, radiation low, time short. A junction ahead sparked, wires snapping in the flood, throwing blue arcs that hissed when they touched water. "Left branch!" she shouted over the rush. They pushed through, shoulders scraping walls, breath loud inside helmets. Behind them, the hatch they'd entered buckled once, then slammed shut under pressure, sealing the path home as if the bunker itself had chosen which side they belonged to now. The junction chamber loomed out of the dark like the throat of some drowned machine. Lucy's beam swept across a column of conduit rising from the floodwater, cables bundled thick as tree trunks, all feeding into a sealed relay node bolted high on the wall. Sparks crawled over its casing, reflections shivering across the black surface of the water below. "That's it," Clarke rasped, teeth chattering as cold seeped through his suit seams. Wolfgang waded first, each step slow, testing footing on the slime-slick floor. The current swirled here, circling the base of the node as if guarding it. Above them, the distant drone hum grew sharper, metal tapping somewhere in the ducts. Mother clipped her tether to a pipe bracket. 2 minutes, she said. Lucy slung her pack forward, fingers already pulling the induction clamp free. She had to bridge the node, pull power without tripping Zerath sensors. One wrong contact, and the relay would scream their position into orbit. Water lapped at their waists now, numbing, heavy. Clarke braced the ladder bolted into the wall, while Lucy climbed. Boots slipping, gloves sparking as she reached the panel seam and drove the clamp into the live housing. Praying the machine would accept the lie. The relay answered with a low, rising whine that vibrated through the water and into their bones. Lucy dropped from the ladder, splashing hard, nodding once, link established. Then the map on her wrist blinked red. Route Delta is gone. The tunnel ahead, their planned exit, showed as a solid block of hazard glyphs. A distant boom rolled through the concrete, followed by a deep metallic groan. The flood wasn't just rising. Bulkheads were failing. "Backtrack!" Wolfgang shouted. Mother shook her head, already scanning. "Pressure sealed it. We go up." Clarke stared at the vertical maintenance shaft, half hidden behind conduit. A narrow throat vanishing into darkness. Water surged higher, pushing debris past their thighs. Overhead, Zerath drone screech filtered down the ducts. Closer now. Lucy fired a grapnel into the shaft grid. It bit with a clang. One by one, they climbed, boots slipping, hands numb. Below, the junction chamber filled, arcs of electricity dancing across the surface like hunting fire. Halfway up, the shaft shuddered. Rust flakes rained into their visors. The exit they'd planned was a memory. The only way out was the way no one had meant to survive. The shaft hatch burst open under Lucy's shoulder, and heat rolled over them like a furnace door kicked wide. Smoke coiled through the maintenance loft, thick and greasy, lit by the strobe of warning strips dying one by one. "Fire in the archive wing," Mother said, voice tight. Clarke hauled himself through last, coughing, eyes watering as he saw the data racks along the wall already burning, plastic skins peeling, memory cores popping like gunshots. Wolfgang stared. "That's our proof." The Resistance had stored every intercepted transmission here. Zerath logistics, crop quotas, shipment routes. Now flame crawled through it. Hungry, erasing years of work. Overhead, suppression nozzles hung dead, dry as bone. Someone had killed the system. Lucy shoved a mask filter tighter and plunged toward the racks, ripping a portable core free, its casing hot enough to blister through gloves. Sparks rained from a collapsing conduit. Clarke grabbed her harness, dragging her back as a section of ceiling crashed down, sending a wave of sparks across the floor. The air tasted of metal and loss. Proof, hard-won and fragile, was turning to smoke around them. A tremor ran through the structure, deep and guttural, like the bunker itself drawing a final breath. Dust sifted from seams in the ceiling as the emergency lights flickered into a weak amber pulse. "Core's going," Wolfgang said, reading the tremor through the soles of his boots, somewhere below. Coolant lines ruptured with a muffled boom, and a hot wind pushed through the corridor, feeding the fire behind them. Lucy slung the salvaged data core across her back, the casing still radiating heat. Clarke leaned against the wall, one hand pressed to his ribs, forcing air into lungs that tasted only smoke. Mother checked the stairwell cam. Static. Then a glimpse of falling debris. "We move now, or we're buried," she said. The bunker had hidden them for years, walls thick with secrets and hope. Now it was turning hostile, systems dying one by one, corridors collapsing like lungs that could no longer hold air. Another shudder hit, stronger, throwing them sideways. Overhead pipes split, spraying steam that screamed as it met open flame. The bunker that had kept them alive was shedding them, forcing them out into whatever waited above. The stairwell split open ahead, a jagged crack running up the concrete like lightning frozen in stone. Beyond it, only a narrow maintenance beam spanned the drop, vanishing into smoke. Heat pulsed upward from the lower levels, carrying the roar of the fire that was eating the archive behind them. Wolfgang stepped back, shaking his head. "Too far. We find another way." Another way didn't exist. The bunker map on Lucy's wrist was a field of red X's. She looked once at Mother, then unclipped the tether coil from her harness. "I'll anchor a line." Clarke grabbed her arm. "You fall. We lose the core." She didn't argue. She just met his eyes. Steady. Then turned and ran. The beam shuddered under her weight, sparks falling past her boots into the dark, halfway across. A shockwave rolled through the structure. The beam dropped an inch with a scream of metal. Lucy leapt the last gap, slammed into the far wall, and drove the anchor spike in with 3 savage blows. The line snapped taut. "Go!" she yelled, voice breaking through smoke and sirens. As the bunker groaned like a dying animal beneath them, the outer blast door blew inward with a concussive crack. Flattening smoke against the corridor walls, cold night air knifed through the bunker mouth, carrying ash and the distant whine of Zerath patrol craft. Lucy hit the ground hard, rolling, the tether line snapping loose behind her as Mother and Wolfgang spilled out after. Clarke stumbled through last, blinking under open sky for the first time in months. Search beams sliced across the tree line, white spears hunting movement. "They tracked the overload," Mother said. already dragging them toward the drainage culvert that ran along the ravine. Behind them, the bunker exhaled flame through its broken throat. A second blast rocked the hillside, collapsing the entrance in a roar of falling stone. Dirt rained down, hot and choking. The Resistance's last safehold was gone. Lucy checked the data core, still alive. Faint blue indicator pulsing like a stubborn heartbeat. Above, a Zerath skimmer dropped lower, engines whining sharp as teeth. They had seconds before the night turned lethal. They slid into the culvert as the skimmer's beam scorched the ground where they had stood. Cold runoff soaked through their suits, numbing fast. The tunnel bent, then split. Lucy froze. Two figures stood ahead in the dark, silhouettes backlit by a flicker of distant fire. Both wore resistance harness. Both carried the same shoulder patch. One raised a hand. "Lucy, it's me." Her own voice answered from beside her, low and sharp. "Don't." The second figure stepped forward, helmet visor cracked, face smeared with ash. Her face, same scar along the brow, same blood at the lip. Clarke's breath caught. Zerath psyops were rumor until now. The copy moved wrong, a half-beat slow, smile too precise. Wolfgang lifted his weapon, unsure which Lucy to cover. The real Lucy didn't look at him. She watched the double's boots. No water dripped from them. No mud clung to the tread. The thing hadn't run through the culvert. It had been placed. Overhead, the skimmer screamed past again, and in that rising howl, the double's smile widened. Teeth too white in the smoke-dimmed dark. Lucy didn't hesitate. She fired once, not at the face, but at the chest seam where the copy's suit met its collar. The round hit with a hollow crack, and the thing spasmed, voice glitching into a metallic shriek that bounced off the culvert walls. Black fluid sprayed, smoking where it touched water. Wolfgang finished it with 2 controlled shots. The double collapsed, skin sloughing, revealing lattice and gel beneath. Clarke staggered back. "They recorded us," he said. Horror dawning. The Psi unit's chest cavity pulsed. A lens blinked. Still active. Transmitting. Mother lunged, tearing the module free. A red icon pulsed on Lucy's wrist. Uplink established. If the Zerath saw the core, saw Clarke, Operation Crownfire burned tonight. Lucy slammed the module under her boot, grinding, but the icon held. "EMP," Wolfgang snapped. Lucy ripped the induction clamp from her pack, overrode the limiter, and jammed it to the module. A white pop punched the air flat. Lights died in her visor for a breath. The icon vanished. In the ringing silence, the culvert smelled of ozone and something sweet like burnt coffee. Burnt? Lucy's visor flickered back to life just as the ridge above them erupted in flame. A blossom of orange tore through the tree line, heat slamming down the ravine. Wolfgang grinned through soot. "Decoy charge!" The blast rolled outward, feeding the Zerath sensors exactly what they wanted. Heat, motion, survivors running the wrong way. Overhead, 2 skimmers banked hard toward the fireball, beams spearing the burning slope. Mother didn't waste the gift. She shoved Clarke forward into the drainage channel's deeper bend, where the water tunneled under rock. The cold current clawed at their legs, but it masked their thermal signature. Lucy popped a second charge, smaller, tossing it upstream. It burst with a sharp flare, echoing like a panicked sprint. The sky howled with engines, hunting ghosts. Clarke slipped. Lucy caught his collar, dragging him through algae-slick stone. Behind them, the decoy fire roared brighter, a lie written in heat. buying them seconds measured in heartbeats and breath. The channel narrowed until the water forced them single file. Shoulders scraping rock. Ahead, a rusted intake pipe jutted from the ravine wall, half choked with grating and vines. Mother didn't slow. She dropped to her knees and crawled into the pipe, boots vanishing into black. Lucy shoved Clarke after her. The metal throat swallowed sound, replacing the world with echoing breath and the drum of water on steel. Behind them, a skimmer beam lanced across the ravine mouth, light bleeding through the pipe seams in thin, searching lines. Wolfgang jammed a wedge into the grating to keep it from rattling, then squeezed in last. The pipe sloped upward, slick with slime, every movement a fight against gravity and panic. Clarke's hands shook as he pulled the data core tight to his chest, feeling its faint warmth through soaked fabric. Midway, the pipe shuddered, something heavy landing above. Dust sifted down, mixing with runoff into a gritty paste that stung their eyes. Lucy didn't look back. She kept climbing, counting breaths, because stopping meant the dark would close and the hunters would listen. The pipe spat them into a service vault, no bigger than a truck bay, air stale and humming with distant machinery. A blast door stood ahead, half open, its manual wheel stripped to raw metal. Mother threw her shoulder into it, forcing it wider while Lucy and Clarke slipped through. Wolfgang stayed back, eyes on the pipe mouth. A shadow moved there. Wrong angles. Too smooth. Zerath pursuit drones, insectile and silent, unfolded from the darkness, lenses flaring. "Go," Wolfgang said, already bracing the door. Lucy dragged Clarke across the threshold. Mother grabbed the inner handle. Waiting, the first drone hit, legs skittering, trying to wedge through. Wolfgang kicked, crushing a limb, but more crowded behind, metal clicking. He slammed his weight against the door, buying inches. Sparks burst as a cutter bit the edge. "Now!" Mother hauled. The door shrieked, closing on Wolfgang's arm. He tore free and dove. The seal clanged home, bolts slamming. The vault filled with his ragged breath and the hollow thud of machines on the other side. Patient, learning the shape of the barrier between them. They reached the surface through a maintenance hatch, disguised beneath scrub and broken stone, and for one breath it felt like escape. Then the wind shifted. The valley beyond the ridge was not dark countryside. It was a grid of pale blue light. Zerath sensor towers rising like skeletal trees, beams combing the land in slow, methodical sweeps. The night hummed with distant engines, not random patrols, but containment. Clarke stopped dead. "They're sealing sectors." Lucy dropped flat, dragging him down as a beam skimmed the ridge, turning dust into silver mist. The air smelled metallic, charged. Wrong. Wolfgang checked the sky. Faint points blinked in triangular patterns. Orbital overwatch. The bunker's fall hadn't scattered the hunt. It had tightened it. Mother crawled forward, peering through cracked stone. "This isn't wilderness anymore," she whispered. Fields below were flattened into landing grids. Roads cut in straight alien lines through forests that no longer existed. The world they'd planned to disappear into had already been reorganized. Survival hadn't widened. It had narrowed to a thread stretched across open ground under watching eyes. Lucy didn't wait for a plan to finish forming. She counted the sweep rhythm. 5 seconds dark, 3 seconds exposed, then moved. She slid down the shale face, boots barely touching rock, using the loose gravel to mask sound. A beam sliced overhead, so close she felt static prickle across her neck seal. She rolled into a drainage cut and kept crawling, staying low enough that the sensor grid skimmed past. Clarke started to follow too early. She reached back, fist closing in his collar, holding him flat until the light passed again. Wolfgang mirrored her movements, tossing a pebble wide to the left. A beam snapped toward the false noise, buying 2 heartbeats. Lucy broke into a sprint, cutting across open ground toward the skeletal remains of an irrigation frame half buried in dirt. She dove beneath it just as another scan burned across the field, turning every grain of dust into glitter. Her lungs felt carved hollow. The valley wasn't cover. It was a cage, and she was threading its wires one breath at a time. Lucy flattened under the irrigation frame, chest heaving, visor fogging with each breath. Clarke slid in beside her, clutching the data core like a child. Wolfgang covered the rear, rifle angled toward the sensor towers. For a moment, there was only wind and the distant hum of Zerath engines. Then Lucy's wrist unit vibrated. Not an alert, not a scan, a pulse. She frowned, shielding the display. The signal wasn't local. It rode inside background radiation, piggybacked on orbital noise, human encryption, old resistance code. Mother crawled in, eyes sharp. "We're dark. That's impossible," Lucy decoded fast, fingers flying. The message was short, fragmented, but clear enough to chill the blood. Crown fire phase shift. Safe houses compromised. Follow coordinates. Beneath it, a timestamp from minutes ago. Clarke closed his eyes. "They know the operation exists," he whispered. A beam swept the ridge above. Closer now. The message blinked once, then erased itself. The war they thought they were hiding inside had just moved, and it had moved faster than them. They moved toward the lights instead of away from them. Every instinct screamed retreat, vanish, survive. But the coordinates pointed straight into an occupation zone. Zerath transport lanes cut across the valley like glowing veins. Cargo lifters drifting between depots built over what had once been farmland. Lucy kept low along a drainage trench, heart hammering as patrol beams skimmed meters overhead. Clarke walked beside her now, not dragged, not stumbling, choosing. His face had gone still, the look of a man stepping back into a fire he had once lit. Wolfgang muttered a curse, but didn't argue. The only place left to hide was inside the enemy's shadow. A supply convoy rolled past, grav sleds humming, human labor crews marching under watch drones. Mother signaled, and they slipped in behind the last transport. Matching pace, heads down. Smoke from the ruined bunker still smeared the horizon behind them. Ahead lay lights, checkpoints, scanners, and answers waiting where collaboration and resistance blurred into the same dangerous ground. The transport line carried them through a freight gate and into the occupied district, where human structures had been gutted and rebuilt with Zerath geometry, smooth angles, pale metal, no wasted space. Yet at the corner of a plaza stood something impossible. Warm light, wooden panels, steam curling in the cold air. A coffee house. Clarke slowed, eyes reflecting amber glow. Inside. Long communal tables stretched wall to wall. Zerath figures, tall, jointed, blue-sashed among red and green, sat shoulder to shoulder with human clerks. Cups cradled in delicate claws. Voices overlapped. Low but constant. Not commands. Conversation. Lucy felt it at once. The hum of minds engaged. alert, questioning. A server unit poured dark liquid into identical cups, the smell bitter and sharp. A Valari with a blue sash leaned forward, arguing with a merchant over crop tariffs. No guards intervened. No one stopped them speaking. Clarke watched like a man seeing a seed he had buried breaking through soil. The Empire's language filled the room, but so did doubt, drifting like steam between the tables. Lucy stood near the doorway, pretending to check a wrist seal while she listened. No orders echoed here, no shouted ranks, no drone patrols hovering overhead, just voices. A Valari student argued about food quotas. A merchant countered with shipping data. A factory worker, still in dust-stained overalls, asked why the Emperor's council never answered public petitions. The words were calm, curious, alive. Clarke didn't interrupt. He watched them the way soldiers watch artillery before a strike. Lucy felt it slowly. This wasn't sabotage, wasn't bombs or rifles. It was pressure building in minds that had never been allowed to question. Every cup on those tables was a small defiance, every conversation a fracture line. The Empire above them still looked solid, fleets intact, banners flying. But underneath, something else was moving, spreading through cities and academies and factory floors. Lucy had thought war meant gunfire and pursuit beams. Now she saw it in eye contact, in disrement, in ideas taking root where silence once lived. This was the battlefield Clarke had chosen, and it was already burning invisibly. Clarke chose the table near the back wall, where the light was softer and the room's murmur wrapped around them like cover. Lucy sat opposite him, helmet off now, face pale under the amber glow. Outside, patrol beams still swept the streets, but inside the coffeehouse, the only weapons were words. Clarke pushed a cup toward her, steam curled between them. "You wanted to know what you're fighting for," he said quietly. She didn't touch the drink. "I thought it was survival." Clarke nodded. "It starts there, but survival without change just resets the cage." Around them, a Valari scholar laughed sharply at something a merchant said, then leaned in, voice low, intense. Clarke watched, almost fond. Empires fall when people stop accepting the shape of their world. Lucy finally lifted the cup, hand steady despite everything they'd run through. "And if it fails?" she asked. Clarke met her eyes, tired but unflinching. "Then at least we tried to change who we were while trying to live." The patrol beam slid across the cafe window, pale blue light cutting through steam and shadow. Conversations faltered for half a breath, then resumed, softer but unbroken. Outside, Zerath guards moved past, silhouettes tall and armored. Mother's voice crackled faint in Lucy's earpiece, extraction route collapsing, drones converging. They had minutes. Clarke didn't stand. He watched the room, the blue sashes, the merchants, the workers leaning close over shared tables. "If we run now, we keep the core," Lucy whispered. "If we stay," he turned to her, calm in the glow. "Then we become proof this place exists." A guard paused outside, visor reflecting the interior. Lucy felt the weight of every loss behind them. Every life burned in the bunker. Survival meant disappearing again. Staying meant arrest, maybe death. But the Valari at the table beside them were arguing openly now. Voices rising, ideas moving like sparks. Lucy removed the data core from her pack and slid it under the table's center brace, hidden in reach of anyone who dared look. The patrol light passed on. She didn't get up. Steam drifted upward in slow spirals, catching the amber light like breath made visible. Outside, engines throbbed, patrol beams sliding over stone and metal. The Empire still vast, still armed, still certain of itself. Inside, cups clinked softly. A Valari student leaned across the table, claws wrapped around ceramic, eyes bright with argument. A merchant countered, voice sharp but alive. At another table, a factory worker spoke hesitantly, then with growing confidence as others listened instead of silencing him. Lucy sat very still, hands around her cup, feeling the tremor in her pulse match the murmur in the room. Clarke watched the steam, not the door. The data core rested hidden beneath the table. A silent heart among many. No banners fell, no shots were fired. Yet something had shifted. Subtle as heat in water before the boil. Words moved from mind to mind, invisible, unstoppable, beyond the window. The patrol light passed again. But inside the coffee house the air felt warmer, charged, as if history itself were leaning forward, waiting for the moment it would tip. In the end, no battle was won with guns, only with courage, belief, and the power of minds set free. This story reminds us that survival is not just about staying alive, but about deciding who we become when everything is at stake. If this journey moved you, follow the channel and join us for more cinematic tales of survival. Hope and the strength hidden inside us all.